Hey, buddy, Bob here. I got my good friend Phil, Trade Genius Podcast 2024 edition. I'm going to explain to you what the Hotel California song and the stock market has in common. Stay tuned.
Trade Genius.
Hey, buddy, it's Bob with Trade Genius. Hey, it is holiday season and our holiday specials are running right now. Just promo code HOLIDAY. You already blew it. You missed the Black Friday specials, but this is your second chance to take advantage of some of the best pricing that we do for the year. Check us out, tradelikeagenius.com, tradegenius.co, tradegeniusacademy.com. All roads lead to Trade Genius. Check us out. Incredible deals. Thanks for listening. Okay, Phil, besides them being on heroin when they wrote the song, what does Hotel California and the stock market possibly gonna have together? And for me, it's like you can come anytime you want, but you can never leave. And I think they got market participants trapped here now. They have a narrative running that everything's all good, soft landing. And we're here to tell you that the data with interest rates are telling a different story, and it's inevitable that the market's going to have to run into a rough patch. I'm going to throw it over to you because you have some really cool charts.
Yeah, okay, so this chart here, guys, is the 10-year, 3-month U.S. Treasury yield curve. And as you can see, we're going back up to a point where it's going to start to normalize and steepen. It's already steepening, but that line there is basically the zero line when it's par, when the yields are the same between the 3-month and the 10-year. Normally, the longer end is going to give you more yield because you're willing to tie up your money for longer, and so they're going to reward you more. When things get uncertain, people don't want that money to be tied up as long, and they kind of flee to the short end of the yield curve initially. And then that starts to normalize. So we're going from a negative yield curve to a positive yield curve. And you can see here that whenever we do get those dips under the zero line, well, that means recession. Every one of those areas that you see a gray background is a recession. And we're just waiting around to see how long it will take for us to get one officially with this market. And, you know, depending on who you ask, I think various parts of the country, they will tell you that it's getting slow and it kind of feels like a recession. So I think it really depends. If you're in some of the more tourist designated areas of the country, maybe not so much. If you're in a resort town or city, maybe not so much. But eventually it covers everything. So our belief is that we're probably already getting into one, and they don't tell you until, 3 to 6 months after the fact. And then they finally admit that you are getting into a recession. And then, Bob, we also have our yield curve chart that we've shared in the past. Probably a good time to bring that up as well. And so what that looks like is here, this chart here, guys, is showing us what the yield curve is currently doing. That's this section here in the kind of that pinkish color. Okay, that's going back up toward this white line, which is basically when this is the 2-year 10-year, very similar to the 3-month 10-year, but the 2-year 10-year is almost at par too. And it's following basically what we forecasted, which would be that at some point next month, we do get back to par. That's when I'm going to say officially, although I do believe we've kind of gone into a recession at this point, Bob, I'll say officially when we cross that line, it's here now. And then below, what we have is the shaded areas. You've seen it happen in 2000 to 2002, and then around 2008 and 2009. What that is it measures out from the time that you started your bottom part of that inversion, and then you started to crank back up. So that peak negative inversion, that's where we mark off 100 weeks. That's about how long it takes for the yield curve to get back to more normal yield curve, which in this case is about 2.3%. So it takes about 100 weeks to go from that negative yield curve up to that positive 2.3% curve. And what that does for us is that basically tells us, and the market right now is kind of following along this blue projection. So that means if this is to hold true, we probably don't see much more in the way of new highs in the market. And that's for everything risk on. So, whether it be equities or crypto, you're basically looking at the highs here, and then we start to roll over. And then, depending on what you want to have forecast as, Bob, the 3-month 10-year would indicate that this plays out till about Q1 of 2025. If you're going to be going with the 2-year 10-year, both could play out. But if you're going with the 2-year 10-year, this could actually last until Q4 of 2025. That's a scenario that nobody's talking about right now, and that would create a pretty severe washout. And I think you'd get down back under into COVID type price ranges for the stock market. So far cry from what we're seeing with the AI pump narrative and all this stuff with Nvidia. I mean, those can fall quite a bit if the economy slows, and then basically it comes down to flows in the market, right? And if the economy is not humping along and 401ks aren't churning out positive flows for the market, that's how you get this kind of stuff to happen. And then the deleveraging events exasperate it to the downside, and why you see some of these severe flushes toward the end of our bear markets that we've had.
Yeah, Phil, I think one of the things that people are missing out on here is that Janet Yellen, for the last 3 months of 2023, played a shell game with the T-bills. And in the first quarter, she's going to have to issue a lot more T-bond. And I think we're going to see the worst of all possible world, because equities are not going to like it, but there's not going to be a safe haven with the bond market. And you're going to get a steepening of the yield curve. And if you get a steepening of the yield curve and the Fed is going to be forced to reduce yields at the same time, you're in a recession officially 5 months from that start, 100% of the time. And that's the only reason why we really care about this, is that, it's one thing if you get an equity pump and an equity dump and you get a bond pump. This is a situation where I think you're going to get an equity dump and a bond dump. At the same time, you have the weak window of weakness for oil and energy too. So I think there's going to be very few safe havens, Phil, coming from basically the Martin Luther King holiday into Easter. And I think people aren't really prepared for this because they've been lulled into a sense of complacency. And I think people really need to be aware of that. Now, how we're playing it, one thing that Phil's been watching very, very carefully, everybody, is that right now you have an environment where if TLT is rising, the stock market is usually up, and the oil markets are down. When TBT is rising, you have the stock market down and you have oil up. We're looking for a break in those relationships. I think we'll see it in oil first, and then eventually we're going to see it with the stock market. Then you're going to have stocks down, bonds up. But until then, you need to be watching oil, ES, and TBT and TLT every single day. That's going to tell you your story. And when that correlation changes, then you're going to get hot and heavy into the bond market, and you get super short on the stock market. But in the meantime, you may get a bond market and a stock market sell-off. We had that before, and we also had it in 1994. So check out your history books on that. And these are nasty, nasty declines because there's no place to hide.
Yeah, and the scary part is just the amount of leverage that's in the system, because that ever since we've gotten into this current modern market, and it's just highly, highly leveraged. And that's why I think we've seen just such extreme moves. I mean, look how COVID deleveraged, right? And again, I would argue that COVID was kind of like cover for really what was banking stress in the system. And, so you can get these very sharp sell-offs. Now, granted, if you're a long-term, holder, you're not really worried about the short-term moves, then they tend to recover relatively quickly. But where it becomes an issue is if you're close to retirement, you don't want to be suffering through another, 2000, 2001, 2002 type of situation. And a lot of people got screwed up on that in 08 and 09 too. So if your retirement's coming due, you're counting on that money to be there, not suffering through a 30 to 40% drawdown. And so that's why you want to be careful, learn how to hedge your portfolio. And that's where you can come into the room with us and we can talk to you about how to do that. So guys, thanks for watching. Check out our stuff over at tradegenius.co. Love to see you guys in the room. These markets are going to be very volatile, we think, in 2024. So check out our specials that we have over there. A number of different packages depending on what you're interested in, most of which can get you into the room with me and Bob, and ask questions in there, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. So guys, let us know your thoughts below. Do you think we're headed for a recession or not? And what are you doing about that? Thanks, Bob. Thanks, guys. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care.
Trade Genius.